Saleha's the real deal, and she's gone out and put together the soap opera of your United States dollar under risk at Treasury, given the crises that are out there. She runs our Treasury covers in Washington. The book is a piercing 200 pages, How the Weaponization of the Dollar Changed the World Order. Saleha, congratulations on the courage on writing this. When Tim Geithner reads this book, when he reads Paper Soldiers, how upset is he going to be?
I'm so excited. This book is coming out on Tuesday. Tim Geithner is actually going to be excited, and not because of how he may or may not look at it. My conversation for the book with him came right before, about a month before the Russia invasion in Ukraine, a month before those historic, almost earth-shattering sanctions that the U.S. led the world on applying on Russia. And somehow he was so pressing in our interview. I asked him all of my questions. He answered everything patiently. And then he held me back at the end. And he said, Saleha, when you're writing this book, I want you to think about how the next generation of policymakers at Treasury are going to have a different America that they're facing. And that shifted the lens through which I was looking at the book.
So I sat across from Parliament with John Taylor, who was at a G7 meeting for a very ill Jon Snow. And they were at the time with the fear of terrorism, foreign exchange transfers as well. I want you to sell to our audience on Apple CarPlay and YouTube the why of this book. They're interested in the Fed. Why does Albert Gallatin's Treasury matter in our nation's security?
The world runs on US dollars. The Treasury Department is the steward of the dollar. The dollar touches everyone's life. You could be a cocoa bean picker in Ghana. You could be an oligarch or a business tycoon somewhere, and you need the dollar, the global financial system, to make any kind of transactions to keep up your livelihood. The U.S. has used that dollar to protect itself. After 9/11, the war on terror did not start with military tanks rolling toward a country. It started with the stroke of the pen when George W. Bush gave the Treasury Department fresh authorities to track money, the money flow of terrorists, and to use economic sanctions. So the dollar gets us health. It gives us the pursuit of happiness. It gives us connection to the world, and it also protects us.
And Scarlet, as Valerie Giscard d'Estaing said in the great Barry Eichengreen at Berkeley, it is our exorbitant privilege.
It is our exorbitant privilege, and it's one that we don't have to think about a whole lot when it comes down to it, because day in and day out, Saleha, most Americans aren't really concerned with the relative strength or weakness of the U.S. currency unless they're traveling abroad. You mentioned an oligarch overseas, you mentioned a foreign business owner, but for ordinary Americans day in and day out, it's not something we have to trouble ourselves with. In your reporting, what do you think will most distress ordinary Americans about the dollar and how the government has weaponized the dollar?
I think the most distressing thing is what's playing out every day across the country and in Washington. It's the self-inflicted wounds that we are giving our country, and that is actually damaging the U.S.'s dominance in the world and the dollar's dominance in the world. If the U.S. can't get its fiscal house in order, make sure its electorate feels heard, feels happy, becomes united, then dollar dominance and American hegemony around the world is not going to last.
Okay. The U.S. Treasury, as you know, has always pledged allegiance to a strong dollar. They all answer that they want a strong dollar. Obviously, we know it's much more nuanced than that. What are they really saying, Saleha? Or is that statement nothing at all?
Now it's really nothing at all. You know, it was Treasury lore. It was a mantra from the Bob Rubin administration. At the time, it meant that we are relying on our economic strength to rule global commerce and to run our own economy, and it underpinned globalization. And now Trump started a movement to look inward, more populist policies, and Biden has carried that forth. Buy America, friendshoring sound a lot like Make America Great Again and America First. And so we are shifting toward a policy where there's no real dollar policy, because no one wants to admit to a weak dollar policy, because with one hand, a weak exchange rate is good for manufacturing. With the other hand, dollar dominance and hegemony is really good for America.
Saleha, off of Paper Soldiers, and I guess it's after the book, it'll be for your second edition, your sequel, I should say. How's Yellen doing? Has she been a successful Secretary of Treasury?
She's still there. She has navigated through a lot. She had to be there to oversee the execution and implementation of some really complicated, huge sanctions on Russia and take a lot of the flack. A lot of people these days are wondering whether those sanctions really worked or not. The oil price cap was a really big deal for Janet Yellen. And of course, inflation. She was one of the people who was calling it transitory while millions of Americans were pain, and then it turned out to not be true. But I think we still need some time to know how her legacy will stand after her tenure.